We're focusing on the Gen AI in data, so empowering analysts for the future of AI and your new roles, right? So I just want to, let's see, there we go. So why is this an important subject? Why is generative AI important to you as a data analyst? Well, the reality is that currently the amount of positions and how it's changing is really going to accelerate over the next couple of years. And in my role as a consultant, advising organizations to digital transformation, how their strategies should change, how their labor force should look, etc. This is a topic, obviously, that is fundamental and core to most of our discussions. How is the workforce going to change? What's it going to look like? So outside of my role as consultant, I'm also involved with teaching with other institutions like MIT and LSE and so forth. So, and we get a lot of input in terms of organizations, business, and decision makers. And that's probably one of the hottest topics at the moment. How will Gen AI impact our strategy and our workforce? How are we going to automate? How are we going to change things? So this is really critical, I think, in terms of thinking about your careers and job growth across industries. So according to forecast, roles requiring AI and advanced analytic skills are projected to grow about twice the rate of traditional analytic roles. And as the new saying that's been coined and is going around, it's not AI that's going to take your job, right? It's the person that's using AI. And I think that's why it's critical to get an understanding of what AI offers and how it can impact your environment and your career. So I think, let me just, so what we're hoping to discuss in the session is just look at growth potential, so that those drivers, also professional skills that generative AI tools have to give you that edge, and then also the strategic value, just beyond the traditional roles, but towards more impact, creativity, advisory capacities. And these elements that generative AI bring to the table really is changing the face of organizations and how people are going about their roles, redefining workflows, work processes, automation, and so forth. But before we dive further into that, I think the question is that we should start with is, what is AI exactly? And I made the note there that AI is more than ChatGPT, because somehow, with the wave that we've seen in the last 2.5 years, generative AI has become synonymous with AI. And AI is much bigger and much wider than that. So to start out with, how do we define AI, right? AI, in my broad definition, is basically a system that mimics 3 core human capabilities, namely decision-making, prediction, and creation. So I share this diagram just to give you a view of the AI landscape, right? So we've got artificial intelligence that encompasses quite a lot of elements. And when we just think of the general one, there was like automation. So we're getting to smart automation. We're all familiar, or hopefully you're familiar with robotic process automation. That was basically rule-based processes, and now we're adding some intelligence to it. So it's getting smart automation or intelligent process automation. And this is putting us in a position to optimize processes. And ironically, many tasks in the past that's relatively simple for humans. You see the information, it's intuitive. It's very difficult for computers in the sense of rules and robotic process automation. But combining that with AI has taken us into a new phase with this. And now we have the structured task execution combined with cognitive capabilities. Then there's the visual perception. AI sees and interprets images. Some intelligent robotics. It's more and more happening. Um, Not so intelligent might be your vacuum cleaner, your um, lawnmower, but these are, you know, it has some intelligence around space, and the task that you want to do is not going down the stairs. Then speech recognition, that's becoming more and more common. AI understanding spoken words, and it's changing the way that human interfaces are working. And then NLP, natural language processing, where that's the ability to process and generate human language, reshaping the way that we communicate, and we're talking to this series and the um, all of these bots already. I've got my 5-year-old whispering to Alexa uh, to put Evan on the show that he's not allowed to watch at that point because he's not quite capable of getting to all of the functions on television, but he's talking. He's talking to the computer, and they're having a conversation. Um, so that's artificial intelligence at the widest, highest level. Now we're moving on to machine learning, and that's really techniques that we have there is decision trees, based classifications. So decision trees is about making precise decisions, um, typically explainable, and in finance functions, healthcare, that's very important. Then we've got starting to do more classification, data based on the probabilities that fit together. Similarly, we've got the K nearest neighbors. We're finding similar data points, and making recommendations and classifications using cluster analysis. These type of techniques would be familiar to many of you that are working in data analysis. And then obviously anomaly detection, fraud detection, those are the things that we've started to see AI do. Neural networks was obviously the next big step, and touched on multiple um, elements of AI, and that's also neural networks together with deep learning and your convolutional networks and so forth. That actually the technology that set us up for where we are now. And we'll talk about what generative AI is in a moment. But these tools, obviously make use of these technologies to find the patterns, do vector analysis and so forth, to give us insights into much more complex data sets, and compressing, decompressing data, and feature learning, etc. So we had this evolution, in terms of AI that brought us to this point. And it's not just the stats and the mathematics and those things that took us on this journey. We've all seen NVIDIA's share price shooting through the roof at some point. It's been clawed back a little bit, but still, it's about processing power. It's about connectivity. It's about access to data. So it's a culmination of even having the internet. It's for many of us, it's been a lifetime. For some others, that include me, I still remember when somebody introduced me to this new application called a browser. So the internet is actually not as old as what many people think, but that's also opened the door for collecting all of this data and information. And then we had the wave of IoT and all of that led us into where we are now. So where we are with generative AI and what makes it slightly different than the other techniques, it's about creating new content, such as automated reports, synthesized research, and so forth. And with that, we've moved from your traditional, that was very much more rule-based, it was logical, that you had expert systems, and it followed human-coded rules, right? And then we moved into the machine learning, deep learning, neural network phase. And that was all about finding patterns. But the reality is, it was still about taking what we know and making a prediction based on that. So basically fitting the points to a certain extent. But now generative AI, these systems, like I said, is designed to create entirely new content. So whether it's text, images, code, and lately even simulated data. In the news this last week, we had a lot of news about we've exhausted all the data. There's nothing left for these models to absorb. And now we're creating synthesized data more and more to train the models further, right? So this, we can get into a debate. Is it dangerous to start creating synthesized data? Can we determine what the models are going to do? Can people start designing behavior, outcomes, society on it? That's another debate. But the reality is we're moving through these cycles of growth into moving from, let's say, descriptive to predictive. And now I wouldn't say we're in prescriptive, right? There's lots of hallucinations and things like that. And that's something we can touch on in a moment, because hallucinations got labeled as a bad thing. The reality is it's actually how these systems are designed, because it's taking two pieces of information, different things, and it's combining it to try and create new things. And the reality is these systems are not intelligent. They seem intelligent, but they're not. They have no idea what they're actually writing and or producing. It's all just the most probable next word, most probable next pixel. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. So the reality is, I think the key takeaway is that we've gone through a journey. AI is more than generative AI, but we've gone through this journey, and many of these technologies are still very much fit for purpose. And you must understand the different AI technologies, depending on what you want to do. But it's brought us to a point where with Gen AI, we're uniquely positioned to enhance productivity and innovation, and specifically in the context of analytics we're discussing today. So how does generative AI work? Right. I think what does GPT stand for? Let's start there. Firstly, you've got generative. So it's a bot, and it means it's generating new text, to stick to the familiar example that we used to. And then there's a trained model. So this model is trained on vast amounts of data. And this prefix that we have means that there is more room to fine tune it. So what we've heard about, some of you might have heard about RAG models. When you take, for example, let's say any one of the LLMs, be it Claude, be it one of the OpenGPT or ChatGPT models, Copilot. We can talk about many of them. What they've fundamentally got is this big data set that it was trained on. And then within a specific project or chat, you're busy uploading documents, and the concept of agents came, and we're fine-tuning it to what we needed to do, be it writing a new report, RFP, helping us write a poem. We can work with that model. And then there's the T, and that's to transform. And that's actually where the magic happened. So 2017, roughly, Google had the first transformer, and it was all about translating. And for any of you that are translating to a language, between languages you know more about, it wasn't perfect. In fact, it was sometimes scary what something like Google Translate would produce, right? But the reality is a transformer is a specific kind of neural network, machine learning model, right? And based on the input, it then predicts the next word, so to say, right? So, and given that set of words, that's including the next one, there's just, it then uses that as input to predict the next word. And so we continue through this process. And that's why if some of you that got involved earlier with these large language models, for example, you would have seen it was much more word like as it like and was writing. We're now at a phase where sometimes it just like and splits out chunks of words, but it's just because it's faster. But you would have seen that process of it getting the next word, taking that whole chunk of data, putting it back in and through this transformer, finding the next one. And there's, I think it's not crucial, it's insightful just to understand where it comes from. But with that insight, you will always also realize that it actually does not know what it's producing. So it's got a perception of intelligence, right? Um, but it's actually not creating anything. It doesn't know what it's telling us. It's not making a decision. We can't put it in charge of the nukes just yet. So ultimately the transformer describes the framework or the design of this AI model. And that's why we're going to have different transformers for different jobs, right? So the transformer you're going to use to help you write some text is different from the one that we're using to generate images, for example, is different from the one that we're going to help us generate voice. So we'll see that we input some words that we type. There's a transformer and it creates voice. Or we give some verbal input, audio input, and then it transforms it into words, transforms it into images. And we're seeing more now the multimodal, where we can give it some images, we can give it some documents, we can give it some voice instructions, and it takes all of this and it transforms it into a particular output. Right. So, and there's a design around it. And the interesting thing about it is when you think about the concept of hallucinations, we chatted about that. I mentioned it earlier. So people were like, oh, it's talking complete nonsense. It's making up things, etc. But that was from the point of view that it's taking two different concepts, be it you wanted to write a poem in the format of, I don't know, Paradise Lost of Milton, similar format about bananas, right? So these are two very different concepts, and now it's throwing it together. It's going to sound okay, but that, and it's going to be in the format and so forth. And it's actually, I tried it and it actually doesn't sound too bad, right? So that was on Chat GPT-4. And then they introduced Strawberry or 1.0, which is more about logic and finding things and fact checking. And then when you give it the same instruction, that particular model is much more accurate in terms of fact checking and questions and information when I extract. But when I asked it to write a poem, it wrote a poem. But the difference between GPT-4 and 1.0 was probably a B and a F if I had to give it to a teacher, because the one that was built to then be to do more fact checking, more rational, it wasn't as creative. So we've compromised on the hallucination for the accuracy. And I make this point to say that we need to understand what the model is built for. And for you that's in data analysis, you would have noticed if you've played around with the different models, some are much better at extracting information. For example, let's say needs to analyze the spreadsheet that I gave it. create tables of all the different names, locations of the people, their addresses, etc. Where another one is not that good at it, but now I want to draft a report. And the other model is much better at drafting that report once I've given it the information than what the one was that was extracting the information. So if you're going to use generative AI, it is really important to understand that transformer side of the model. Yes, the training that happened is obviously important. So if we train a model on our company's information, for example, that's the context. That's the information. We cannot expect it. Let's say it was a law firm and we've trained it just on legal documents. We can't expect it to start answering questions about cricket history and who scored the most in what season and so forth, because that's not the data that it was trained on. Similarly, the transformer will determine the outcome. So you're not going to get it to write something if it was meant to create images, as a high level example. So I think that's important to understand, right? So the GPT, if we take ChatGPT, effectively it's an AI chatbot that they OpenAI developed. So it was a GPT, and then they put the chat part in front of it. And now we're having an interaction where it's prompting you to give those first words that is then inputting into the model and using it to find that next word, so to say. And so they've trained it to understand your tone, the intent, and so forth. So just in terms of the models, I think the two main ones, we've got the language models, the GPT, and that's built to understand, and generate human understandable text. So what's it good for? It's good for writing and analysis of reports, generating summaries, drafting code, and so forth. And then we've got the other type of model, and that's the diffusion models. And that's where we have the DALL-Es and the Mid-Journey, and that's for creative outputs like visualizations and art. So these are the ones that are more familiar. If they can some to just give you a feel for the difference, different transformers, with different outcomes. So why would we want to use it? For enhancing data in terms of storytelling, impactful visuals, versus drafting code, for example, for analyzing data, extracting data. To make it more practical, to compare these, so we've got ChatGPT, OpenAI, very versatile conversational AI. Okay, again, text generation, very good for brainstorming. And I'm just using ChatGPT. It can be any one of the others. Like I said, we've got Claude, we've got Perplexity, we've got, the list is just getting more and more. We've now got new entrants into the market. DeepMind was in the news the other day. Stock prices fell. Again, and that's just a side note, needing to go into the detail, the fine print in terms of those licensing agreements. And again, what the models have been trained to do. So where does your data belong? So we'll touch on that later when we think about ethics and what we need to worry about, security. But yeah, there are these models like ChatGPTs. It's very good for brainstorming, summarizing, quickly doing a draft. That's how most of the time I start nowadays. So, okay, these are the high level concepts, give the structure, and then we start building out from there. Claude, very much focus on safety, lots of contextual depth, right? So certain things that will just tell you, this is not ethical in its opinion. To give you an example, and in actually all of the platforms that I tried, I said, compare these different LLM models. And all of them did a comparison, except Claude from Anthropic. It said, no, it doesn't feel it's ethical to compare their competitors. So that's a interesting outcome. And again, I think, let's say it was 3 times it did it, and the fourth time it actually did compare it. And it shows that element of every time it's different. If you ask the same model, the same question, you're not going to get the same response. And that's that transformer, that probability of the next one. So, and then we've got Midjourney, and that's visual first AI generating images. And again, in this case, it's presentation dashboards, you know, and that's the outcome that we're looking for in that case. So the question we need to answer today and what we're looking at is, how is generative AI impacting the work of a data analyst, and redefining roles, enhancing productivity. And to start that discussion, I would like us to take a look at the data, AI's role in the data analytics lifecycle. Okay, so it starts with data collection and integration, data governance, quality, data processing, transformation, exploration, insights, visualization, reporting, and automation and workflow orchestration. So in terms of data collection and integration, generative AI has the ability to really support, automated data collection processes. We've even now got AI-assisted ETLs, extract, transform, load. For those of you that are familiar with that, getting the data into your database, so to say. Data schema detection. Those are things that we're finding. Automated data mapping, saving a lot of time for any of you that have done those. And these capabilities are, it's really significantly speeding up and simply just the gathering and integration of data, which not too long ago we were saying, no, 80% of the work is getting the data ready, right? And really understanding the data and extracting the data and so forth. So generative AI has massive potential in that space. Similarly, in terms of data governance, the quality of the data, old thing, garbage in, garbage out, So we've seen large language models just as a good example of that. And there's now a move towards some small language models. And how they're managing that and to get relatively similar levels of productivity or quality of answers rather, is by getting the data quality to be really, really good. So then you need a lot less data if your quality is good. If you're just taking everything, we're getting back to the concept of a normal distribution. Yes, there's going to be poor data, there's going to be good data, but if we have enough data, we'll get to a pretty good answer based on the statistics that sits behind it, right? So AI-driven metadata generation, intelligent data lineage tracking, anomaly detection. Those are techniques that's going to help us maintain robust data quality, right? And that's really important, like I said, to ensure that the analysis and the analysts have trusted data to ultimately give accurate insights. Next, we've got data processing transformation. So at this stage, one of the things that's really powerful is the code generation, automatic query optimization, syntax refactoring, and we've heard a lot about that. Lots of developers, mid-level development positions that are under threat because of these code generating possibilities. So that's a two-sided sword. What are we doing with that data? How are we working with the code? Or are we actually freeing ourselves up to add more value? So ultimately, it helps us streamline the data transformation tasks, and reducing the time, but more importantly, reducing the errors, in my opinion. Next, it's about the exploration and insights. So this is really something exciting. So when we're exploring the data for insight, AI assistants it's basically these agentic agents that we can generate and create. So they can look at different things. And so through NLP queries, automated trend detection, predictive modeling, again, quicker, but more importantly, deeper. And I think that's, again, it unlocks that next level. A lot of the challenges that we have without these tools, it's just we run out of time. We run out of runway. The money gets up. Oh, it gets finished before. So lots of effort go into getting the data right. And then how much time is left to do really deep analysis and get insights. So I think that's important. It's about going deeper, enabling us to go deeper, to get the next levels of insight. Then visualization reporting, we've touched on that. I think most of us have an experience with that. That's kind of where it started, right? The generative AI really excels at visualization and reporting. And if I can put my own hand up, yes, I know what I see, but writing it in an elegant way, writing it really well. These tools are just helps us to expand on those ideas, expand on those insights, and accelerate again the delivery time on something that ends up being admin. It helps us do that better, quicker. Also creating AI generated dashboards, dynamic reporting simulations, and then again, for people that are very quantitative, sometimes the storytelling is not their strength. So it helps us to tell the stories better because that's what sells the solution. That's what sells the insight. How well do we tell the story, right? So, and then finally, automation and workflow orchestration. Again, we've already started seeing these AI agents helping us with our inboxes. Some of the use cases that goes into the more general public domain. But we can deploy it into the data, right? So it's scheduling of tasks, it's real-time anomaly alerts, it's just the overall workflow automation and transforming how our data projects are managed end to end. So within this life cycle, there's a lot of opportunity to employ these techniques. Transformative potential, I'd say automation of routine tasks. That's where one would start. AI-driven tools for data cleaning, as we discussed, pre-processing, enhancing data exploration, suggested insights, suggested correlations. That has the potential to transform how, as data analysts, we work. Then the role needs to evolve, so from technical tasks, it should free you up to be more strategic and advisory, and to have the time to really process what you're seeing. And then, as I said, that deeper part, for me, that's a big thing, going deeper, exploring the why, the what next questions, those we get freed up. And again, as I stated right in the beginning, it's not about AI taking jobs. It's about AI working with us. So we need to empower ourselves. It's another tool. It's like moving from a calculator to a computer, to Excel spreadsheet, to the internet. And so we've gone through technologies, be it horses to steam, right? Water to electricity. It's just another tool that enhances our productivity to make us focus better and add the value instead of doing mundane tasks. And then finally, I touched on it, but I think it's important to also be aware of the bias in AI outputs, right? It's a challenge. And ethically, we need to think about it and really put the effort in to understand these outcomes. Because ultimately, the bias is built into the data just because it records what we think, what we do, what we say. And again, it has no idea what it is saying. So from a data analyst perspective, data scientist perspective, it is something that we need to be conscious about so that when we design the models, when we do the analysis, we are aware of these. So, and then privacy, compliance considerations, those are big. What are we giving? Nothing's for free. When we use certain tools, we've used the free versions. What are we letting go into the public domain, into these models? But also, just in structuring our own data within our companies and firms. I've been involved in a couple of engagements now where the providers like a Microsoft come to the clients and say, listen, we've got Copilot and it can do this and this and this. The reality is that the roles in firms are typically not set up correctly. It's easier to give somebody a little bit more rights and access than really apply ourselves. In the past, that was fine, right? It was better than every now and then get an email or a service call log to IT to say, can we get access rights to the following? But when somebody wanted to find something that they're not supposed to see, they really needed to go and look for it. Somewhere it was in a PowerPoint presentation, in a file, in an email. You didn't have access to the email boxes and so on and so forth. Now, if we're going to make these large language models and analyze data, if the roles and the security measures are not in place, it's very easy to find it. I suspect that there might have been companies that have gone this route, and the first time the employees get access to the company's metadata, they start querying who's earning what in the company. So we really need to be aware of the information that we're putting into, or basically how we structure our data and the architecture behind it. So those are very important. So on further to that, there are other risks that we need to look at and some mitigating techniques. So lack of explainability. That's one of the things that we've already seen with machine learning, even before we got to generative. So the reality is, and we've seen it, that generative AI can, from time to time, produce results that is a challenge for us to explain, okay, for us to validate. So it's very important to have robust audit and validation processes in place to systematically review these and verify the AI generated output. We can't just accept what it says. Then, like I said, security and compliance. There's a lot of risks that can get introduced, particularly around sensitive proprietary data. So AI security, critical. Access controls, like I mentioned, encryption, those are techniques that we can look at. Accuracy and data quality. The output is only as good as what we put in. Okay, so to mitigate these risks through diligent data governance, it's regrettably, most organizations I walk into, yes, security side is stronger, but the data governance and people's respect for the data, that's relatively lacking. And it's, to a certain extent, you understand it because in the past, we weren't as dependent on the quality. When you went to that particular file that was created, that particular client, if you got one digit wrong in the telephone number, it wasn't the end of the world, right? But now when we're starting to build these models, it's becoming more and more crucial to have those governance structures in place. And AI models can help us on the one hand to do that. But ultimately, you know, we need to ensure that our AI models are trained on data that's got rich context, clear metadata, and accurate lineage. Okay, so those are critical. And then obviously high cost of AI workloads. Now, this is something that can quickly run away. Any one of you that have a cloud account and have service running, etc., we need to change the mindset. Number one, it's not a sunk cost anymore like we had with service. It's now about processing. Is it really necessary for this cloud server to be active over the weekend, active after business hours? But AI initiatives take this even a step further, because it can very quickly escalate in cost if we're not monitoring it carefully. So proactive cost monitoring, clear usage limits, tracking resources and resource utilization, and optimizing cost structures, before scaling our AI efforts. I think that's important. Then model drift, another element. So AI models, it's evolving quite rapidly. It can lead to unexpected shifts in outcomes over time. So to mitigate model drift, model visioning, systematically tracking updates, maintaining consistency in AI performance is critical. And then obviously the inconsistent outputs. Generative models can produce variable outputs for similar inputs. We spoke about it earlier. We've all experienced it, right? That have started playing with these models. So that impacts reliability perception. So again, adopting standardized prompting techniques, structuring and fine-tuning prompts carefully to reduce variability, that can improve output consistency. But coming back to the data governance, the quality, prompt engineering, we need to start also training users, not just ourselves, but organizations. And it's important just to understand and actively managing these risks. And then we can confidently leverage AI to its full potential. So on that point, I would like to maybe open the floor. If there anybody that, have identified, if you could think of repetitive tasks that we haven't mentioned, that you guys I'll be interested to hear some more. Let's see, Q&A, maybe it's there. Some interesting Q&As already. Anybody that have something that they feel is something that I've missed? Okay. Not gonna get into the Q&A just yet. Let's see, where am I now? Okay, I'm in the have any of you started using generative AI for your problem solving? Okay. See, I see there's another. Oh, yes. Natasha wrote, yeah, copy RTF data to Excel. Definitely. And that's the Excel point is actually a very good point. One of the organizations I'm involved in, they receive a lot of information from clients that they then have to validate the data they receive from the client against their databases and so forth. And the reality is that a lot of the staff members, yes, they can work in Excel, but they don't have advanced Excel skills. And working with generative AI models, it's been really a revelation in terms of working with that data in Excel. And it basically took a good 3 training sessions that were set up to take them through how Excel can be used better with generative AI, and just open up, be it some code, be it how you set up the sheet, how you clean the data. That's been excellent. you quickly see. Just quickly trying to see some of the. I now lost it. The questions are either growing. Okay, good. I see there's one about code. I will touch on the questions just now. I thought I included a couple of, in the chat. Oh, okay, sorry. I've got questions and chats here. So thank you. Sorry for missing that. So in terms of the chat, improve VBA code, definitely. What difference between I improve data commentary and okay, so we're going to those just now, just on the coding. I'm going to jump ahead just to close up here before we get into the questions. And so for me, a couple of key takeaways before we get into questions is number one, generative AI, it enhances our creativity, our productivity. It's not replacing humans, and it's about learning how to use those tools effectively. It's understanding the capabilities of the tools so that we ultimately make better decisions. And we need to embrace this shift in AI for career growth, because that's where everything is going. I think from a next step perspective, for those of you that haven't, explore tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Gemini, and so forth. Midjourney, there are many tools. They're basic. It feels like every day there's some new tools. Look in your own processes once you start understanding it and identifying opportunities where you can enhance your processes with AI. And then staying informed on AI developments. I'll be honest with you, this is what I do every day, and it feels like I can't take a long weekend and I'm behind. Just things are moving so quickly. So yeah, it's exciting times, and it's really enhancing the way that we work. So with that, I'm going to go into some of the questions. I've got two here. So in the chat, helps with brainstorming and summarizing. Reduce or write precise word count. Definitely, I've done that. You know, you write your thoughts, and then you're like, oh goodness, it's not fitting into the 2,000 words, right? Let's get it more concise. Let's get it more accurate. Let's get those ideas transferred better. See on the Q&A side. Okay, so when using models like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, what happens to the data you upload into these models? Well, number one, like I said earlier, it was also with DeepSeek. It was a big thing when that got released. Go look at the policy. Go look at the licensing. So on the free model, a lot of that data could get absorbed by that particular model. I can't speak for each of them, to be honest. And then as you pay, go into paid versions, different versions, your data becomes yours effectively. So on, for example, the corporate model, a big thing that Microsoft is pushing with their technologies is if you're on the licensed corporate model, it's your data stays your data. They're not using it to train models, but it's dependent on the particular model that you use and the version that you're on, right? So yeah, so the subscription models, training the model for specific business domain from scratch. It depends on what that subscription is trained on. So like I said, we've got the pre-trained, which firstly it's trained on a vast amount of data, but then you fine tune it. So with the fine tuning, we are uploading, for example, documents that's specific to your particular area. To give you a good example, I've recently been working on a RFP for a very specific solution, obviously. And when I say RFP, we're producing the RFP to then send out to potential bidders. So by taking some existing RFPs that are similar in terms of what the work is about, and then uploading that, and then adding to that specific instructions, I could create a context that it is trained for that specific need at that point, making use of all the other data, but you didn't have to train the whole model. It's already got similar types of information there. So you don't have to, for many of these large language models, go train the whole model. You can just fine tune it on your specific area that you're looking for. Okay, just go there. Okay, there's the questions on this side. Really, I see the job market going for junior analysts. The reality is that I think junior analysts could leapfrog in many ways. And it frees up the opportunity to where there's a lot of skill that people acquired over years. Some of those skills are not necessary, so you can accelerate your career. I think the big thing is to become subject matter experts within the area. So it's about the insights. In a way, it's creating a more even playing field, because everybody needs to learn these new tools, and not necessarily being the to become a Python developer with 10 years experience, you needed 10 years, right? Now you can leapfrog the 10 years in many ways, and get and understand and quickly generate code, improve code, so forth. Yes, there will be an advantage to experience, but I think it's like I said, it's shifting how much deeper we can go. It's creating more emphasis on insights versus particular technical skills. So time will tell, but that's my suspicion, that it's about learning these tools, and different skill sets that you need to acquire that could accelerate your career. At the same time, I think the insights, yes, there's an element of subject matter expertise, knowing the environment that you're working in, but at the same time, there's another, it does more quickly, it's going to separate those that would have just been technical people following instructions and just coding according to a more senior person, and they would have been stuck in the position for the next 10 years, versus and they'll be kicked out of the system quicker, those type of positions, versus those that do have the insight, do have, let's say, a bit more of the talent, they will accelerate much quicker. But that's my opinion, not necessarily what we will see happening. I see PJ Starkey saying, any particular resources recommended to learn about the latest developments? Luke, I see you would like to answer that one. Let's just go, I'll quickly see, randomly grabbing if I split on existing data. So in terms of AI being built on existing data and bias towards one language or another, I think there is an element of that. But it's not, with these capabilities of translating, data can very easily be translated within the models. But we have seen that depending on where the model comes from, that it would lean into different cultures. It will have access to different data. It will be trained differently, and some guardrails would be put in depending on legislation of that area. So the language doesn't limit it. In fact, if you would in English ask for papers on a specific topic in a particular language in a country, it's going to go and find that for you, if that is within the model and the training. So it's not going to be limited by language necessarily because of the translation abilities that it have, but it depends on the design of the model. And so you need to have an understanding of where it comes from. So I see, yes, and could Claude be used by organizations to manage or triage complaints, misconduct, more objectively and efficiently? Uh, it's a difficult one. I think, see, Sam, she would like to answer that one.
No, Leo, just marking them as being answered. Please do answer. Thank you. Same with
Okay.
the question on resources recommended. It would be great if you could answer that.
Okay. Apologies for misunderstanding it. Okay, so firstly, in terms of the managing, triaging, and so forth, I do think that there could be within these models and something like Claude, there could be less subjectivity, but ultimately it's still up to the individuals to look back at the feedback and to apply themselves, right? It would be the triaging. I think there's an opportunity. Triaging is a very, very difficult problem to solve. Even up now, that's not necessarily the strength of these models. It's about creating, it's about extracting, but triaging, I would say, would be an additional AI model. I worked extensively on a project. We were trying to do grant applications and triaging those. And we were working on combinations of using the crowd, using AI models, but no. So these models are not meant for triaging per se, but extracting the information. Yes, summarizing the information, finding key points in it for you, and then to input it into the next model. I think that'll be good. In terms of the resources, there's a couple of most of the bigger players I've started to also release lots of free training. Microsoft, AWS, Google. It obviously looks at their tools, their technologies, but it also gives a good grounding in terms of the general. I've seen IBM have released some of them. So a lot of the technology providers are releasing a lot of nice resources to get started. In terms of the latest technology, the latest trends, I must be honest, there isn't necessarily a place. I have a number of people that I'm following on LinkedIn and places like that, some other thought leaders. And then you have to kind of keep an eye on it. But like I said, if I am engaged for a couple of days, it feels like I've missed out already because things are just moving so quickly. But I think the good, solid technologies does filter to the top. So it's just about staying plugged in, keeping your eyes open, and finding the right people to follow. And the more you start reading about it, the more you get into the feeds, good and bad, as we all know. So yes. See if there are other questions and answers. Maybe I should work from the top. Um, I see in terms of GPT, I'm honest, I actually don't know if OpenAI has a trademark on it. They might have an open or chat GPT. But no, there's a GPT is basically what we refer to it as. Yes. And we've also got here, from what I understand, hallucinations are inherent to all LLMs. Yes, it is. But to a lesser extent or not. And that's so the more freedom we give it, the more creative it becomes, the higher the probability of hallucinations. And we've seen, because of a need, but it's because what you need to know what you want to achieve, right? So if it is about, I want to write a factual historical document and do research and use it for research, then there are other models that have now been built to go and cross-check information in other sources, and not too long ago, I could convince ChatGPT of pretty much anything. We all recall those, what's the answer to 2 plus 2? It says 4, and then we say, no, it's 5. And if we say it enough times, it will apologize for getting it wrong, and 2 plus 2 will become 5, right? So that's been built. There's been a lot of work on having alternative models. Output. So in terms of prompt design, prompt queries, prompt engineering is more the bigger term. What I've learned is you shouldn't be, it's a journey. So given the reply, one can then start refining it and tweaking it. A big thing about prompting that I have found is, again, the better you understand what you are questioning or interrogating and doing with the system, the better you know what to ask, right? But also making the questions and building what you want to do more granular, and building up has a lot more success. So it comes back to the old problem-solving methodology that we're familiar with, and that's, okay, I've got this big problem, I want to solve this goal. How do I start breaking it up? And then start building towards that, having broken it up. So that's my experience, works well. Go more granular and build up in terms of the information that you're extracting. So in terms of synthetic data, obviously, again, the model has certain input that is linked to an output, and the what you put in, then what would be the next, and so forth. So it's just seeing it as any other tool when it comes to data quality. Obviously, we don't have, when it's synthetically designed, a lot of the errors, if not all of them, are actually there's no errors in the data. So that means we're not having outliers. The skill now moves to getting your synthetic data, and how you build that model that produces it. But the big thing is, because there isn't outliers, we don't need as much data to then get to the right answer, where the incorrect data was basically, statistically, as we all know, nullified by the volume of data. So that's why the synthetic data is working. And in some cases, synthetic data is important, right? So let's say, for example, we want to, and maybe I'm drifting a bit off generative, but if we want to do some model for looking at a nuclear plant, and doing predictive maintenance, finding potential, the reality is there isn't much data about finding those potential, because typically for a nuclear plant, the maintenance is so preventative, that we never really get the rust to then train this computer vision ML model to identify that there will be some rust there, using a maybe a inaccurate example, but you get my point. So sometimes if we want to now start building models, some data there just isn't, because it was too dangerous to create that data, or we never got into the position to create it, but we actually want to be able to identify it and to, so similarly, even let's say you've been really good with your security, but now you want to start also creating agents that help you with threat detection. If you never had those come in, now you need to identify and model and synthetically create the data to train those models on. If AI is built on existing data, does that mean AI that draws on data in one language has more capabilities? Okay, I think we've answered that. If you're going to train it on, again, it comes, I think we've answered the thing about the languages. It's ultimately about the data, but there's also pre-processing. So if it's going to be in a particular language, you need to convert it to have a similar language. So I'm not, so some of these are black boxes, as you know, but if you want to train it on all the available data, you need to bring it to a standard. So my suspicion is that for these larger models, let's say you've got your company data, that's not relevant because it's just focusing on your company data and data that's relevant to what you want to do there. But if you want to say all the data in the world, you still have to bring it to some base for this model to work. And I suspect that's what they do. So let's see if I can get some of the shorter ones maybe. There's an interesting one. Didn't mention pushback from the visual creative industry. I think, yes, there's a lot of issues that, not issues, a lot of the stuff is new, and I think it's just being needed to handle it, be fair about it. But people will adapt, right? So at some point, the creatives will also say, well, this is a new tool in our toolbox, potentially, or this is a tool that we can make other business models out of, be it that my data was trained or things were trained on it. IP law, I think, might need to adapt potentially. But we're already seeing that the creation was not necessarily the issue. It's more about that you get the right to use the data in that way. Let's see. That's an interesting one, Rajiv. I've never seen it in terms of mixed languages, and whether or not, I'll be honest with you, I speak 3 languages, and depending on what frequency I am put into, if you speak one of the others, but I'm listening in one, I sometimes don't understand what somebody's saying, simply because you're listening in one. So at this stage, I suspect that the models work in a dominant language, but I've not tested it. So that's just suspicion. I'll actually, as soon as we're done here, I might just try mixing the languages in my query. So Samuel, GPU versus CPU computer. It depends what you want to do. Obviously, GPUs are much more expensive. If you're wanting to do word processing and most of the basics, then CPUs are more than fine. GPUs, there's a shortage in the world at this point because of the AI wave. And it's just much more powerful, as we know. And it came from, originally it was graphic processing units, to be able to do the visual things, and then it found its way into being good for AI. At some point, it was identified as being better for Bitcoin, blockchain. But we're seeing different models emerging. I've seen some interesting models talking about blockchain and you know, altcoins, etc., where we're saying, okay, well, you've got all these resources and computers that are connected. How are we using distributed processing for these AI models, where we can drop the cost? You don't have to own the hardware. You just get access to the hardware. That's obviously the models that we're seeing, and what the big data centers and AWSs and the Microsofts of the world are trying to sell you. But we're also seeing it getting more democratized. There's an interesting Theta coin, I think, that I recently saw, and that comes from South Korea, universities there. And what they're doing is basically selling processing capacity that they're not using. Again, the model needs to support privacy and all of that. But we are, I would say, still in the early days, in the first minute of the first hour of what all of this is going to entail. So what I won't do is necessarily at this point invest in too much hardware myself, and try and set up big data centers myself, depending on your organization. And just because there's still so much happening in us finding our feet within the space. See, there's a question about exactly infrastructure. Yes, at this stage, like I said, there are shortages, and then there's also the green element and energy, and people are looking at putting these things in the ocean to cool it down from a heat perspective. So, but it's getting better all the time.
Hello, Leo. I'm
Yes,
just
hello.
jumping in because I know we're 15 minutes
Oh,
over now, so I'm just conscious of the time for you and for everyone else as well. I really, really appreciate obviously you going through and answering the majority of those questions, and hopefully it's been really useful for everyone. So I just wanted to say just a massive, massive thank you from me, from everyone else involved, and obviously from all the attendees here as well, for your amazing session here. It's been really, really interesting, and hopefully everyone here has found that as well. But is there any final kind of closing pieces and thoughts from yourself on what you've gone through today to close the session off before we let everyone get off and carry on with their evenings, days, wherever it is they are in the world?
are you referring to me, Luke?
Yes,
Sorry.
sorry, Leo. Yeah, any closing pieces from you?
No, I just really thank you everybody for the opportunity. I enjoyed sharing some of my experiences and learnings with you. And yeah, you're welcome to, like I said, reach out and ask any other questions you might have via other platforms, and obviously follow up with Luke and the team if there's interested in some of these courses that they have. That is a nice springboard to get you started on this journey. So yeah, thank you again for your time.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Leo. And yeah, just echoing that, if you are interested in the Career Accelerator, please do make sure you're downloading the brochure and reaching out to enrollment advisors to have a chat with them about it as well. And thank you as well for all the learners who have attended today who are already on the Career Accelerator. I hope you found this extremely useful and insightful. So yeah, a massive thank you again, everyone, for being here. Hope you all enjoyed the session, and a huge thanks again to you, Leo. Enjoy the rest of your days, everyone.
Thank you very much. Same to everybody. Thanks, Luke.